You are listening to the podcast of the Mátyás Corvinus Collegium, the largest talent management institute in Hungary. If you want to know more about our mission, please look up our English website at mcc.hu/en or check out our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter channels. For interesting articles and analysis of our professors, external contributors, and students, look up our knowledge base at corvinak.hu/en.
So welcome to this new episode of MCC Podcast. Today, I'm joined by two participants of the Budapest Fellowship Program, a fully funded program that provides a unique opportunity for American scholars and professionals to gain a deeper understanding of Central Europe, especially of Hungarian history and culture. In the first year we still have four wonderful fellows here in Budapest. Among them, Stephen and George, who have been featured already on this podcast, on MCC Podcast. You can find the link in this podcast description as well. But this time, I'm happy to have the other half of the group, Nicola Németh and Ryan Brockhaus, here with me. Thanks, guys, and welcome.
Good to be with you.
Thank you for having us.
So your CVs, while preparing myself for this podcast, I looked at your CVs that actually prove that Budapest Fellows come from all walks of life, literally. Nicola, you've got a legal background and a bit Hungarian too. Yeah, and Ryan, you had worked actually as a certified paramedic before studying global studies and global security in Arizona and conducted research on various geopolitical themes since then. But maybe you can tell better your story, so I'm going to give you the floor now.
Like you said, I've been a practicing lawyer for, going on almost, I think, about 10 years now. I've been in the practice for about 13, 14 years, a wide variety of areas of law, and have my own practice actually in California as well. But I've always been interested in minority rights, and I was fortunate enough to actually be part of the Reconnect and the Reconnect Hungary and the Reconnect Transylvania program a couple of years back, and had a chance to visit Transylvania and absolutely fell in love with Transylvania and the Hungarian community there, and was fortunate enough through the fellowship to be able to come out here and focus on the human and the minority rights.
Could you tell us a bit about your Hungarian background as well?
Sure, of course. So as you said, my last name is Németh, so you don't get much more Hungarian than that. And so my dad was actually born and raised here in 1944 and fled in 1969 due to the Soviet regime. And so we were born and raised in Connecticut and always had a very, very strong influence of the Hungarian background growing up, and very excited to be back.
Ryan?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Yeah, my background is a little bit different than that. As you mentioned earlier, I had a prior career in the emergency medical services in the state of Arizona. I had been a certified paramedic, and actually still have my certifications, but was engaged in the ambulance service and the emergency medical service in the Phoenix metropolitan area for well over a decade. It was a very fruitful and a very gratifying profession for a long time. But I had always had kind of my hidden interest within geopolitics and global events. I know it sounds kind of nerdy, but especially...
Please explain this. I mean, I don't want to be more
especially
personal,
from a man coming from kind of the EMS service that has no relation to geopolitics and global interests and what have you. But no, that had always been my interest. I grew up in a military family. My father was in the Air Force, served 20 years in the U.S. Air Force. We were actually stationed from 1988 to 1991 in West Germany.
Wow.
So we were there when the Berlin Wall came down. So ever since I was a little kid, I had an interest kind of in the military matters, but also expanding it into kind of the geopolitical realm, the big picture of all things. I think that really started as a child growing up as a military brat, if you will, is the monikers is said in the U.S. So that continued throughout my education, and it had always been in the back of my mind. Finally, in late 2017, I had made a decision along with my family to kind of change course, go back to school, finish my bachelor's program at Arizona State University in global studies. And then shortly after I received my degree, this wonderful opportunity called the Budapest Fellowship Program came up. I had prior experience with Hungary because of a part of the global studies program we had to study abroad for a period of time, whether it was 6 weeks, 8 weeks, a full semester, or a full academic year was up to you. But you, as a undergrad student, had to spend time abroad to fulfill the global studies requirements.
And you chose Corvinus University.
That is correct.
I mean, yes, you choose Corvinus University.
Yes, just the one on the Pest side. No, again, hearkening back to growing up in a military family, being in Europe at such a momentous and big event like the fall of the Berlin Wall and sort of the end of communism, if you will, Central Europe in particular has always piqued my interest. I mean, ever since I was a child. This gave me an opportunity to kind of fulfill my dream in a way, to kind of spend some time studying and learning the history, the culture, the customs, and traditions, not only of Central Europe, but of a particular country in Central Europe. And the opportunity came for me to go to Budapest.
Could you tell me a bit more about how did you learn about the program itself?
Sure. So I'm actually trying to remember exactly how I discovered it, but it was kind of a very fortuitous finding. It wasn't as if I was searching for it, and I feel very lucky that I did. And again, because I had been with Reconnect Hungary and Transylvania group prior to, I reached out to some old friends and the individuals that actually led that program, who I've remained in very close contact with, and picked their brains. I said, hey, what do you think about this program? And they said, oh my gosh, this sounds fantastic. Yes, absolutely apply. And that's how I ended up here.
Okay, and for you, Ryan, was it that easy?
No, actually, I did not really know much about the program until I received an email in May of 2020 from the woman who is head of the study abroad program that I took part in the fall of 2019 when I went to Corvinus University in Budapest. Received an email in May saying, hey, we just have learned of this new opportunity coming up for American scholars to engage in research, live abroad in Budapest for close to a year, and it sounds like you could take your family. Would you be interested? We immediately thought of your name as soon as we heard of this program. So I did a little bit of research myself, went into the Hungary Foundation website, looked at the prior organizations or prior fellowships where Hungarian students had come to the United States for a period of time to study and kind of establish connections. Thought it was really impressive, and applied for it. I was lucky enough that one of the professors that I attended in class at Corvinus was a man by the name of Dr. Sándor Gálai, who had a very interesting...
With the perfect pronunciation.
Yes.
Hungarian. Perfect.
It took practice. It took practice, but I got it. No, Sándor Gálai has been a tremendous help. In fact, he was actually the one that wrote my letter of recommendation for the BFP program. Anyway, the relationship that I had with him goes back to my fall semester at Corvinus University. He was the professor in the Central and Eastern European studies post-communism, kind of the transition period where we studied the transition period and the emergence of democracy and free market capitalism into this region. Thought it was extremely interesting, and he made a great impression on me, and I believe that I probably made a decent impression, and at least a decent enough impression on him to where he would write my recommendation letter. So that's really where that went.
You will have a host institution and a research project or a research area. Could you tell me a bit more about that?
Sure thing, yeah. So I was actually very, very fortunate to be placed with Dr. Zoltan Kantor at NPKI, and under his mentorship and tutelage, as well as his entire team there, it's just been an extraordinary year. And my focus, and I was again very fortunate that the fellowship was interested in what I was interested in, which was really trying to envelop more research on the Hungarian ethnic national minorities living just basically anywhere in the Carpathian Basin. And so we were kind of originally focusing on Transylvania and Ukraine, but just because of the time constraints of the program have really just thrown it all into the Transylvania region itself. And it's been an absolutely fascinating adventure and journey over the past year. I use this analogy often in the sense that every door that I open seems to lead to 20 more, and you can only go down one. And so there are all these unopened doors that I'm very eager to open, hopefully sometime in the very, very near future as well. But again, my focus primarily has been on the rights of the Hungarian community in Transylvania. And specifically with my background, being a legal background, the attempt and the final publication is really trying to focus on the individualized rights, so not just the community rights as a whole. And so we've been focusing a lot on specific case law that's occurred in the last 5 to 10 years, the reports that have come down that are somewhat conflicting as to the presentation of information, as to what's actually occurring to the Hungarian communities locally as well. So it's been a very, very, very fulfilling and very rewarding area from a personal perspective, and also one that I, again, hope to very much stay in as well, because I think it's an area that needs further focus and further attention from a more international audience.
Yes, and this is pretty symbolic, given your Hungarian background as well, that you have started this research on the 100th anniversary of the Trianon Treaty, which resulted the dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy when Hungary, or the monarchy, lost the 2/3 of its territory and millions of Hungarians. So creating these minorities of the present, actually.
Exactly.
So how do you see the situation in the present, focusing on Transylvania?
Sure. It's such a complex issue. I actually was doing an interview recently when we were actually in Transylvania a couple of weeks back with the local newspaper, and I was asked a very similar question. And just the overall umbrella term that I can apply is that it's just incredibly, incredibly complex. You've got a lack of kind of a governing body, I think, that has to deal with minority and human rights, generally speaking. You've got conflicting information, again, that comes out with the official reports versus the NGOs and the human rights groups as well. And you've got a lot of, I think, Hungarians that are looking for possibly territorial autonomy, which is another hotbed issue. Spoke again with several leaders in the community, both from the legal perspective as well as the research perspective in Transylvania. And there's kind of a overarching notion that the linguistic rights are kind of what the main focus is. In terms of again, on paper, there are certain laws that look great. The application of those laws doesn't seem to be as effectual, unfortunately. So I think that's kind of what the main ascertainable and hopefully achievable goal would be, to have the actual application of those laws, to have equality in the ability to, again, with the 20% or higher areas, where the Hungarians reside, that you can have dual language, the application of dual language, the confidence as a Hungarian to speak Hungarian in a court of law, which does not seem to be the case as well, whether it's perceived or actual. So there's lots of really interesting, specific nuance issues, I think, arise from that.
And very complex one.
Again, very, very complex. So I know that we're limited on time, so I could talk for hours on just what I've learned alone, and I know that I'm still just at the very, very surface of the iceberg.
So, and Ryan, you have focused in your research on the U.S.-Hungary military cooperation and its future perspectives. Could you tell us a bit more about it?
Sure. To be completely clear, the focus of studies for me was the U.S.-Hungarian defense cooperation. And obviously that covers not only things within Hungary, but geopolitical situations throughout the region. The host institution that I've been a part of is the National University of Public Service at Ludovica. And the mentor that I have had is Balázs Martonfi, who's been just an amazing person, very helpful, and has been with me really every step of the way. So I can't laud Balázs enough with regards to his assistance throughout my journey and my particular field of research. Now, as far as the relationship with United States and Hungary from a defense perspective, I would consider that the catalyst between the overall bilateral relationship. As we've seen over the last really decade or so, the political relationship between the two countries kind of ends up becoming a little bit more of a roller coaster ride, and it really depends on the American leadership. Under Obama, things became very tense, politically speaking, more specifically to the U.S. ambassador at the time, and things tended to improve pretty dramatically under the Trump administration, especially with the appointment of Ambassador Kornstein. And moving forward under the Biden administration, there's still a lot to be said. We don't really know where the overall relationship is headed politically speaking. From a defense perspective, however, it's been really since the the regime change in Hungary in 1989-90, it's been a pretty steady trajectory up, which is very nice to see and hear. And the relationship blossomed really long before Hungary's ascendance into the NATO transatlantic alliance. But there's certain elements of the defense cooperation that's pretty unique. Typically with each former communist or Eastern Bloc country that had left the Warsaw Pact after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, entered what was called a Partnership for Peace program. And it's kind of more or less a track for eventual membership into the NATO alliance. And Hungary took part in that starting in 1994. There's also the IMET program, which is the International Military Education and Training Program, where a lot of Hungarian soldiers, academics, officers could then go to the United States and essentially learn military doctrine or Western military doctrine through the General Staff College. That began actually much earlier, and Hungary began taking part of that in 1991. So you could see the relationship between the two countries beginning to develop before eventual ascendance into NATO. However, there's two particular elements that really gives the relationship kind of the special status in a way. One of them is the Ohio National Guard and Hungary Defense Force partnership. That began in 1993. And it's no surprise that a lot of Hungarian Americans
in Ohio,
correct,
obviously,
reside in Ohio. So that was done in a strategic way, so to speak, because of the cultural ties among Hungary and Hungarian Americans, where most actually within the United States reside in the state of Ohio. So that began in 1993, and there's been well over 100, almost 200 different means of collaboration since that relationship began that year. And then in 2005, you have the coalescence and the emergence of the Special Forces Agreement and the Special Forces relationship between U.S. Special Forces and Hungarian Special Forces. That began in 2005. The U.S. was integral in kind of creating the Special Forces Battalion, and then eventually through Hungary's modernization program, we know now as the Zrínyi modernization program. This Special Forces unit has now emerged and consolidated into a brigade. The 2nd Special Operations Brigade, which now makes up one of 3 brigades within the entire Hungarian army. So that shows the importance and the staying power, really, with Hungary's ability in the Special Forces departments, and then the overall relationship. Now, specifically to regional, the U.S.'s stance with regards to Ukraine and Russia tends to be a little bit different than the Hungarian perspective. And that's understandably so. The United States is a country that is half a world away. It consists of 330 million people, and it is really a continental or world power, okay? If you look at Hungary, it's a country in the Carpathian Basin in Central Europe consisting of roughly 10 million people. So naturally, their perspective is going to be looking more regionally. That's what their perspective is. So, and oftentimes, maybe not oftentimes, but sometimes, the perspectives may be different. With regards to Ukraine, Hungary, or I should say the United States, views the situation in Hungary from a purely global geopolitical perspective, a sort of us versus them. The government is trying to gravitate more westward, and Russia is their eastern neighbor that is becoming more bellicose. and is becoming more and more confrontational through the Putin regime. And we saw this in March, where we had an amassing of some estimates anywhere between 80,000 to 100,000 Russian troops who were doing snap exercises. I would suspect that would probably happen again in September with the Zapad Russian exercises. It happens every 4 years. But again, you could see America's reaction, comparatively speaking, to Hungary's reaction. And, Hungary is more focused on a regional outlook, and they want the region to look and feel peaceful. Any divergence from that or any further creation of instability puts Hungary in a difficult position. So, and then specifically speaking to Russia, that's we're getting into an area that could be kind of gray, and I don't want to get myself into too much trouble. But the relationship between Hungary and Russia is purely transactional. And that's clear not only through the defense cooperation between the United States and Hungary, but also from the political perspective between Hungary and Russia. It's purely transactional. It's very businesslike. And the United States and Russia is kind of going
less
back.
Less businesslike.
Yeah, less businesslike and much more confrontational, especially from a political perspective. And now that you've got an American president in the new administration under Joe Biden, who is looking to become a little bit more confrontational, publicly speaking, with the Putin regime. So again, that could create maybe.
We didn't necessarily see that at the latest Biden-Putin summit, or did we?
No, you didn't.
That's already the gray zone.
Well, again, that's the gray zone. I mean, there's a lot to be said in that summit meeting last month. I think you could walk away with your head held high if you thought that the summit wouldn't amount to much other than it wouldn't further deteriorate the relationship. And it looks like it didn't. There had been some instances of agreement. There had been some red lines drawn, particularly among the Biden administration, on things Russia should not do, particularly from a cyber security perspective. But overall, it seemed like it was cordial. But again, the weeks and months and years will be able to kind of tell more clearly of what really came of that summit meeting.
Yeah, let's get out from the gray zone and move to the second part of this podcast, where I've prepared a little game for you. It's a sort of yay or nay game, when I will tell you some cliches or statements about Hungary and the region or the fellowship, and you will have to confirm or correct the statements. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay, so the first one. Okay, this is very typical. Hungarians smile less than Americans. They are shy and or grumpy people.
I would disagree with that strongly.
Thank you.
Yes, very much so. And I also think it definitely depends on where you are regionally within the U.S. as well. So again, I'm from Connecticut and from California. Again, I know Ryan, like you said, was a military brat as well. So we've experienced, I think, each wide array of different American personalities.
So they smile more or
well.
less.
I would, yeah. Well, it depends on which coast we're on, shall we say? But no, I think that that's a huge misnomer about the Hungarian people. Everybody's been incredibly kind and welcoming.
Yeah, I think the word grumpy, that to me, it should be omitted, because I don't find Hungarians grumpy. Maybe a little more shy, yes. I would say a little bit harder to please as well. And I think that may come from the communist experience, where I think there's this natural born sense of skepticism at first among Hungarians. But what I have learned is that when you essentially scratch a little bit below the surface and really get to know Hungarians, they are the most real, and yes, they do smile. They are the most real people that you could probably meet. And so it takes a little bit more to impress them. But once you get to know them a little more, these are friendships that could probably last forever and are probably the most solid friendships that you can ever develop among people.
if those who have followed your journey here in Hungary certainly saw lots of posts on social media, on the websites about the fellowship and about your trips outside of Budapest or even to Transylvania. We have mentioned that. So the second statement is the Budapest Fellowship is all about receptions, dinners, and meetups. The research is secondary.
Is the question, is that what the
Ryan is
perception
laughing.
is? Or the reality could not be further from the truth. The research and the work is all-consuming, and I mean that in a very positive way. The receptions and dinners, I think, we did some introductory receptions and dinners at the very beginning in the outset of the program itself, but again, I think everything has been incredibly focused on the research, on work, on, again, the actual teaching element through MCC as well. So definitely would be the opposite of that.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Nicole. I mean, it's if one is to try and get into this fellowship program just to do the stately dinners and shake hands and pat people on the shoulders, I think this is the wrong program for them, because it's it's a lot of work. I mean, part of this, as we've discussed, involves a topic to research. And this research is going to cover pretty much the entire duration of your time here. For us, it was 10 and a half months. And it's a lot of work, a lot of information to uncover, a lot of people to talk to get you to better understand the research you're doing and the topic that you're covering. So, and I would maybe say that the stately dinners and the meeting with high-level officials and stuff, that's sort of the icing on the cake, if you will, because they're wonderful. In my experience so far in my life, this is one of the few times I've ever had the experience of doing that, which has been wonderful. But the overall objective of this fellowship program, I think, is not just networking, but more importantly, conducting meaningful research that maybe at the end helps foster a better relationship between the two countries, between the United States and Hungary. Because there's certainly elements that can be improved on. And I think these future fellows, if you look at it that way, this can be an extremely rewarding fellowship program, as it was for me.
Okay, the third one is coming. It's a lighter one, I think. Hungary is Budapest, the capital, nothing else to see here.
I will start off on that one. Of course, giant no to that. I mean, we've loved our time here, in the actual city itself. But I think some of our most fond memories that we have are actually of visiting the countryside. We were just at Lake Balaton, the Tihany region this past weekend. We had actually been there before in November as well. Completely night and day difference, of course. But no, I mean, just for me personally, I think for my husband and I, at least, our favorite times were getting to visit the outskirts of the country as well, and it just beautiful areas. So whether it was again Esztergom or it was again like Balaton, or again going to Transylvania, which is as some may say maybe a bit of a gray area, but is an extension of Hungary as well. I think it's just been beautiful.
100% agree with your assessment. I mean, we could probably come up with a list of 20 locations in and around Hungary that are not in Budapest that I would highly recommend future fellows or anybody that wants to come to Hungary and visit, any American that wants to come to Hungary and visit. Least of which, as you mentioned, Nicole, Lake Balaton, Pannonhalma, Győr, Eger. Let's not forget the Tokaj wine region.
Of course, how could I forget?
Yeah, and Modern Sarospatak. I mean, this is, it's a beautiful country, and there's, I think a lot of Americans get the idea that, it's in the Carpathian Basin, Central Europe, it must be flat. And don't get me wrong, there's definitely a lot of flat areas, particularly in the eastern part of Hungary. But man, oh man, when you get out into the countryside and you see these smaller cities, the architecture, the national character within each of these towns that are distinctly Hungarian. I think, yes, Budapest is the hub of Hungary. And obviously, not only is this the city that you fly into and that you're probably going to spend the first few days into, by all means, experience Budapest because it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world. But venture out into Hungary because there's also an awful lot of beauty out there.
So surely you have met many Hungarians during this year, during your fellowship here. So let's have a statement about the people here again. Two Hungarians can have three different and often contradictory opinions. They like discussing politics and social issues everywhere.
I would say that the topic of politics, history, and religion is much more readily discussed here than you would in the States. It's kind of those three regions, generally speaking, are kind of off limits, right? If you have the Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner, it's always said, do not talk about those particular topics. I personally love the fact that Hungarians have an opinion on that because it means that they have, again, whether it's a passionate opinion or just a general historical knowledge, because, again, there is such a long, you're talking over 1,000 years of history here. So, and it's been a very, very, again, using the term that you had used earlier, Ryan, a very, very much of a roller coaster history as well. So I would say yes to that in a very positive way, that it's something that we, at least again from a personal point of view, I think it's fascinating and everybody's incredibly respectful. I love hearing the different variations of opinions, more conservative as well from the academic field, which we don't usually hear back in the States as well. So it's been very, very eye-opening and I think absolutely necessary to have a very open and a very honest dialogue on those topics. Very, very nice to see that here.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've had some of the most robust political, religious, and economic debates, geopolitical debates have actually happened at my time here in Hungary. Through my host institution, through MCC, through HF, the other fellows that have taken part of this, like George and Stephen. Just very, very healthy, I would consider healthy debates, and the freedom to kind of express your true opinions. There's no hiding true beliefs, but expect it to be challenged. Because I think, to me, that is a healthy form of debate. When you talk and you share your opinions, expect it to be, combed over and looked at and questions to be brought up. And I've experienced that a great deal here, and I think it's extremely healthy to have robust conversations about critical topics in this world today. I think Hungary's in a great position to have that because it is so readily inviting that kind of discussion. Regardless of what political position you're in, let's have that debate. Let's hash it out. Let's talk about it because that's really how solutions are found.
And the last one, my personal favorite, I try not to laugh. The Hungarian language is beautiful and easy to learn.
Absolutely beautiful. Again, for me, there's a type of, I don't know if nostalgic would be the right word, but I find a real love of the language just because I remember hearing my dad speak it growing up. Unfortunately, I did not learn it. Absolutely beautiful, beautiful language, especially as we're learning more about vowel harmony. We have a fantastic teacher as well. As to the ease of the language, there's a real logical, I think, element to the language itself. That being said, I would not say that it is easy by any stretch of the imagination, but it's definitely, I think, worth the challenge as we're moving forward. And I will speak for all of us here. I think we are all going to be engaged in pursuing further learning in the language as well. So it's something that we all hope to take with us and continue on as well. So we will hopefully become fluent one day.
Yeah. Well, it was beautiful. The two words you used, beautiful and easy,
to learn.
No. I would consider it unique and hard.
Okay.
It truly is in a language of its own. I don't think there's any other comparison. Maybe from what I've heard, maybe Finnish in some abstract way can be kind of be similar to the Hungarian language. But overall, I think from an English speaker, it's a difficult language because like you were mentioning, vowel harmony, the rhythm, the wording. There's very, very little commonality to the English language. So you basically have to take your English-speaking hat off, put it down, and open yourself up to learning kind of a new way of speaking and a new way of learning a language. And that's what the Hungarian language is. So no, it's by no means easy, but it can be done. And when you learn it, it's a really amazing language.
And I wanted to end this podcast with this question because you both made a very brave move to Hungary with this fellowship program with your families. I mean, Nicole, you are here with your husband, and Ryan, you are here with your wife and 8-year-old son. Please tell me a bit about this perspective and these experiences that are related to your decision.
Sure. So yes, like you said, we were here with my husband as well. And the irony is we actually had gotten married very shortly before we moved out and I was accepted into the fellowship program. And we had, Hungary has always been a very, like I mentioned, a very significant part of my life. And even when we were, started to date, we said, or at least I said, that we are going to be spending some time here. And he was very open to that. And so he absolutely fell in love with Hungary. And this is throughout the lockdown period too, which I think speaks volumes about the actual country and the people itself, right? Because you didn't have the kind of touristy vibe. You didn't have a lot of the lifeblood that you currently have, right? Especially with it being in the summer months and then things being reopened. But even then, my husband completely fell in love with Hungary itself and with the people as well. So we do have a little one on the way as well. She's going to be arriving.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And just to show you how much, again, in love with the country he has become, he has agreed to, we haven't picked the exact name yet, but she will have a Hungarian middle name as well. So,
wow.
Yeah, and we'll be back. So it's just a matter of timing. But it was, again, I think unforeseen challenges, I think for all of us just because of the COVID time period as well. But again, that's something that extends beyond, the confines of the program itself. But the program was very welcoming, I think, for, all of our families respectively as well. Very, very family friendly. I think we were deeply impressed with how family friendly Hungary is. Again, every corner that you see, there's a beautiful playground, and everyone's been very, very supportive of us expecting as well. So it's just been such a wonderful, positive thing for us to see, again, through the program directly and then through the country as well.
Yeah. And for us, it has been wonderful as well. We have our son, unfortunately, well, I guess I would start off by saying, unfortunately, he wasn't in a bilingual school. That was our first plan, was to get him into a bilingual school system where he would learn Hungarian on top of English lessons. That fell through, unfortunately. So we went with our next option, which was this English-speaking Montessori school. And his experience there has been absolutely amazing. He has blossomed into this wonderful extrovert of an 8-year-old. Within the first week or two, he was asking to meet some friends of his at Margaret Island so they can play outside of a school setting. So for us, that was very heartwarming and such a relief for us. As a parent, the last thing you want is to have this experience that lasts about a year and have your children or child struggle through this whole adventure. And that was not the case for us. So we were very fortunate. The Montessori school has been amazing. His teacher has been great, and allowing the children, not only our son, but the rest of the kids in the class, open up and interact with each other. It's been really wonderful. And he, I believe, has developed some long-lasting friendships that are going to extend far beyond when we, return to the United States here. This is going to be how many kids in the United States can say that they spent their second grade year living in Hungary and experiencing this great country and this wonderful city. So it has been wonderful from the perspective of our son. My wife especially, she's also helped this young 14-year-old with English speaking lessons. And then she started that in January. And that's been really gratifying for her as well because, and again, I can't speak about it 100% because I don't want to butcher it up, but she participated in an English speaking competition. And that was one of the reasons why they wanted my wife to kind of help her along, meet weekly, and kind of guide her through the English language lessons just to speak. And that has been really gratifying for my wife as well. And just the overall experience. This is 10 and a half months being here. Just a lovely place. And it's going to be sad when we leave in a way. Obviously we're Americans and we love America. We look forward to coming back to the United States, but a part of us will be missing because we have considered Budapest, we've considered Hungary our second home, and we will still consider it our second home in the months and years ahead.
Well, Nicole and Ryan, it's been a very special discussion. Thank you very much for your honesty and openness and for your time being here with us on MCC Podcast. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to this MCC Podcast episode. For further media content, please look up our English website at mcc.hu/en or look for us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you want to read more by our professors, external contributors, and students, check out our knowledge base at corvinec.hu/en.